Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, coming to you from the Daily Detroit studio at Techtown, celebrating their 20th anniversary of serving the community here on the Wayne State campus. Congratulations to them. I'm Jer Stays, and joining me at the table is none other than Norris Howard. How are you?
I'm here, man.
I'm always happy to have you here, and today we've got a couple of stories that I think you've got some strong opinions on. I think that I do too. One is a really strong listener request, and we're going to start there, and it's on more of the serious side. Okay. And then we're going to get into something more on the sports side, but not like sports ball player side, but more about kind of the commercialization of the sport. So people do not think that Norris is stepping in for Fletcher today.
I watch sports too, guys.
Right? So first up, this political story. In a recent ruling, a federal court has approved new Detroit area state house districts that are more favorable, they say, to black voters. The new maps, redrawn by Michigan Citizen Redistricting Commission, they hew more closely to county and municipal boundaries and increase the number of majority black districts. Critics of the original plan argued that it diluted the votes of Detroit residents by extending districts from the city into the northern suburbs. The new configuration is set to take effect for this year's election. I will say that the number of districts that cross the Detroit city lines it's cut in half down to just 4. You know, it's pretty difficult to talk about the exact lines in audio, but I think there's just a greater thing at play here, Norris. I know you want to talk about it.
Yeah, and you know, first of all, I think this is part and parcel of just a larger national conversation that we've just been having with gerrymandering and, you know, representation and allowing people to have more of an impactful voice on the electoral process. And I think this is a step in the right direction. Obviously, I think there are aspects of these maps that may or may not be perfect, but no map is going to be perfect because demographics and population shift so widely over time. But I think where we were previously was a place that I don't think anybody in Metro Detroit was really happy with. I mean, for the first time in 50 years, Detroit is not represented by an African American in Congress at all. I think that's a missed opportunity. I think that's
why does that matter so much to you? Because I read the feedback saying, well, race shouldn't matter with this. What about just the best candidate? There's a lot of controversy. You know, some people really, you know, they don't have an issue with Sri Tanadar. Other people really do. He seemed to coalesce. He seemed to be the talisman of this issue in a lot of ways, regardless of his own policies. I think a lot of people who are critical of that look at Sri's spot specifically in the U.S. Congress, which is not a state house seat.
Right.
But they look at him and go, someone like him and go, why? Well, why? Or, you know, we had State Rep McFall on the show, a friend of the show, listener of the show. His district before ran all the way from down here, all the way into, say, Madison Heights and such. And he said, you know, it's a good thing to bring these disparate areas together. And he works really hard, he said, to like build things in the community. And I have seen him in the North End and things like that. But a lot of people don't look at that district and go by heart, oh, this should be together.
It's because you also have to fish where the fish are. And let me explain what I mean by that. If your district, say, splits between southern Troy, Madison Heights, and goes all the way down through Hamtramck or whatever these crazy lines used to be, right? You're going to spend more time in areas that have more votes collectively, or at least have more donors collectively. That's the only thing that makes sense. So it bears to reason that you're going to spend more time in the wealthier areas. Even if you come down to the city of Detroit or Hamtramck or Highland Park, wherever that district is, it's going to serve you better to pay more attention to those areas that have a stronger voice, that have more money to spend, that are more likely to get you back into those places of power. And that has posed an issue because there's not a lot of extra money in some of these neighborhoods in the city. You're not going to find donors. You're not going to find the most politically engaged people. Yes, folks will vote, but you're 9 times out of 10, if you're talking about people who are firmly engaged in the political process, you're typically talking about folks who lean more highly educated, lean more white collar. These are all things that can be studied. And I think when we talk about redistricting and why it's so important, and getting back to your original question about why race is important, is because people are ultimately always, or an electorate is ultimately always going to feel certain candidates have more of their interests in mind. And I think when we talk about a place like the city of Detroit that is so self-segregated, that can't be an issue that we ignore. And it can't be hand waved away of, oh, we just need, why should race matter? I think that's a statement said by people who race doesn't affect their daily lives.
So a pushback to that I've seen is, all right, well, look at Mike Duggan, right? Like, he didn't even live in this. I mean, he worked in the city, but he didn't even live in the city for a number of years until he kind of ramped up to run. Why did he get so much support?
Well, I think Mike Duggan is I would say, benefactor of a certain era in time in the city of Detroit. He also had the right partnerships, because one of the things that people in the city of Detroit craved and they wanted was to see investment. They wanted to see stuff. It's not so much that they wanted to see the house next door to them rebuilt and rehabbed and refurbished, even though that's needed as well. People wanted stuff. And Mike Duggan was able to bring stuff. He was able to make the corporate sponsorships. He was able to be a part of the revitalization of downtown and certain other neighborhoods in the city. And I think that is why certain people and certain demographics in the city were so behind Mike Duggan.
Okay, I'm going to ask something that's going to get me in trouble. This whole Detroit sign thing, I'm pivoting a little bit here. We'll circle back to the districts, but this whole new Detroit sign thing, I've been watching it go up on 94, right? These giant Detroit Hollywood style letters. There is a lot of consternation online about it. But when I went to the barbershop, like the literal barbershop, or I have gone and talked to people, they're actually very excited about this sign. And it actually passed unanimously through city council, which tells me something that nobody said no.
Nope.
And I wonder how much of it is about policies for in the neighborhoods, and how much of it is, I see stuff in downtown and I want stuff in my neighborhood, and how much of it is actually about equity and policies, and how much of it is, well, I want the new restaurant in my neighborhood.
No, it's stuff. It's about stuff. It's not about policy. It's about stuff. It always has been about stuff. And, we're not at the level of many other cities in terms of Detroit proper. We're not at the level where we could be worried about the minutia of policy. Right, the average Detroiter.
There will be a lot of people who push back. On that one.
No, I don't think the average Detroiter, at least the people that I've spoken with, my family members, my friends. This is absolutely anecdotal, and I have
growing
no data.
Up in Brightmoor,
growing up where I grew up, this is anecdotal, so I don't have data to back this up. People want stuff. Okay,
define stuff in your
mind. And what
mind.
I mean by that, they want to see that the park has been rebuilt. They want to see a new restaurant opening up. They want to see the new Meijer has gone up.
They want to see us do in our newsletter a thing about the restaurant in their neighborhood.
That's what they want to see. The equity of it, for most people, is secondary. And that's sort of the issue within an issue of the city of Detroit right now.
Is that part of the lack of voter turnout?
I think that's a part of it. I think it will only make it worse. However, I also at the same time think that most people don't care that much. If they see that their neighborhoods in their cities are, quote unquote, getting better, and as we see crime rates going down, murder rate going down, more stuff popping up downtown, obviously we want to see that investment move northeast and west. But people are seeing more investment, and most folks are sitting back and saying that is a net positive, at least in the electorate.
Is part of the exodus to the suburbs about having access to stuff?
Yes. Stuff in schools.
Because those suburbs are not bastions. Not in all cases. Every place is different. Part of the issue of talking about the suburbs in general is that every city is a patchwork and they operate differently.
Yep.
But it's not like it's a bastion of equality.
No, stuff, schools, safety. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the three.
Or different orders for different people.
Yeah, different orders for different people, but those are the three big reasons.
So circling back then to this map conversation, how do these redrawn districts get people more stuff? And does it impact the Democratic majority, which I think it's I think it's still going to hold, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
I think it'll hold. I actually don't think it'll be more difficult because I think the demographics, particularly of Oakland County and southern Oakland County, have changed. I think that the sensibilities of that group have shifted a little bit, especially post Roe v. Wade being overturned. I think that has shifted quite significantly over the past few years. And I also think that just the sensibilities in general of Metro Detroit, the suburbs have become more diverse. There are more people of color living in those areas. And so I think that those communities are a bit different. Now, to the point of, will it bring people more stuff? That remains to be seen. I don't think anybody can predict the future. I think it stands to reason to say that some of the elected officials will have more of a connection to understand what stuff is needed. So if you could say somebody who potentially grew up in the district that they serve, which is what we hope that these people are connected to the districts in which they serve, that you would know, if I was running for a spot that was somewhere up in the northwest side of Detroit or on the west side of Detroit, I would know what's missing over there. So I would be a little bit more obliged to provide service to those people.
Do you think that the diminishing of districts that cross city lines or City of Detroit lines will hurt with cooperation? Like we're seeing the rise of like the Transit Caucus and things like that.
First of all, listen, what cooperation, right?
There's some. There is some
there's
on the Democratic side now.
There's some, but let's be honest, okay? Let's be honest. What cooperation? We haven't seen it bear fruit until we've been put under the gun for something like the NFL draft. That's the thing that these flashpoint events have been reasons as to why people want to step up and provide cooperation. If that doesn't come, if the NBA All-Star game doesn't come in the future, or if all these other events, the Super Bowl doesn't come back, or all it's politics as usual. It's back to stat quo. The district lines have not necessarily bared out the level of cooperation we saw when they did cross the city of Detroit proper. So why not just make it so where these people feel better represented by their elected officials?
So in your opinion, are these events that push boundaries? Because I get in the inbox, man, why are we caring so much about the NFL draft or whatever? So are these a net positive in your mind because they create a force point?
They're net positives, right? There are things that bring up issues that I see and bring up blind spots that I see, but ultimately they are net positives. Ultimately, they are things that force Metro Detroit to cooperate. And listen, if you're forced to cooperate or it's of your own volition, at the end of the day, it happened. So it's a net positive.
So these new maps not just affect the city of Detroit, but a number of suburbs and inner ring suburbs. We will put a link to all of it in the show notes so you can take a look at your district. And these are on the state legislative level. So you can take a look at your district and see how it impacts you, who you might be voting for. I'm curious, too, to talk to some friends of the show, and especially when I go up to the Mackinac Policy Conference, to be like, okay, districts change. What has changed about how you're approaching things?
And I think that's going to be very telling of the question you asked in terms of how does the cooperation continue, right? Because if people see that those district lines don't include them anymore or don't include cooperation with the city proper anymore, I'd be interested to see what some of those answers are.
I also think it's interesting, too, because a number of those inner suburbs demographics, you go to Warren, you go to other places, they're far blacker areas now. And so if you're doing this by race, I think some of that includes the fact that a lot of your communities just north of 8 Mile do not look like they did 15 years ago.
And that speaks to my point of talking about the shifting demographics in some of those close suburbs and why I think that Democratic majority will still hold.
Okay, for topic 2, Randy Essex from the Detroit Free Press has an editorial out about the commercialization of sports. And Norris, let's talk about it. Now, the Detroit Tigers are known for kind of this new home run celebration. Immediately, I thought pizza because it's got the staff of the pizza guy and 3 fake pizzas on there. It's every time they do a home run, they do a little thing marching around, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to paraphrase here, but Essex makes the point that while it may seem fun, linking the celebration to the team's owner's pizza business raises concerns about corporate interference, turning organic fun into blatant marketing. The blurring of the lines, he kind of posits, between sport and business could frustrate fans who come for the sport, not the logos. And if corporations have to be involved, the hope is that they bring some quality to the table. he goes on to kind of throw hot and ready pizzas under the bus, saying, hey, serve the Mike's pizza, because there's the Mike's whatever fancier pizza outlet in LCA. Serve that instead of the Little Caesar stuff at the ballpark.
Let me tell you something.
What are your thoughts here?
Let me tell you something, man.
Baseball's real steeped in tradition, man.
Let me tell you something, okay? As somebody who grew up in the city of Detroit, who's been through some hard times, them hot and readies got us through. All right, so word to Mike, and word to Mike Ilitch for paying Sister Rosa Parks' rent for many years, and nobody knew about it. But anyway, my point is this, right? If you are a fan of any sport in America, that ship has sailed on commercialization, especially if you're a fan of the NFL, right? You talk about a sport that is built for you to have commercials. A game that should take 90 minutes ends up taking 4 hours because we got to build in time for commercials. So let's take that part of the conversation and sit it off to the side. That ship is sailed. So we arguing something moot here. In terms of the celebration, I think the Illich is on the team. And if they want to integrate or potentially sell home run sponsorships, guess what? That's their right as the team. And I can feel how I feel about it. I think it's stupid, and I think it's probably, first of all, it's the most I've talked about baseball in the past 6 years because the Tigers have not been all that great. Great start this season so far.
Oh, yeah.
But if it gets you talking about baseball, it is doing its job, because baseball got to do something. All right. You're talking about a sport that is not seeing the growth of basketball and soccer in America. It's not seeing the same level of participation at the high school level and even in some cases the collegiate level. Baseball got to do something.
I mean, I think I'm probably the last generation of baseball fan.
I don't want to say last. I just think you're the last generation of, like, you know, the white baseball fans. I think if you're going to be a baseball fan, you better learn Spanish or Japanese. That's who's going to run the league soon, you know, because those communities have just decided to invest heavily in the sport. They have entire cultures in their countries around the sport. And, you know, I just don't think that we have the same connection to baseball that we used to. It's just facts.
In some ways, I am a baseball traditionalist, because being a fan of baseball, it's like I still kind of wish there weren't as many playoff teams. Like that kind of tradition. There's some traditions that we very much.
Don't tell me you're like against the designated hitter rule and stuff like that, right? That's ridiculous.
I know. But
That's
like,
ridiculous.
Like I love that Ohtani can hit and pitch.
Go away.
I feel like that's the game.
No,
to me. I'm also, you know what? I'm glad they made the bases bigger, and I'm glad they added a pitch clock, because that helped. Anyway, my bigger thing is that I kind of agree with you that commercialization. I mean, I'm a fan of soccer. And anybody who looks at a soccer jersey, it is, oh, here he goes. He's unzipping. There you go. We've got, what do we have Arsenal. Here? We see Emirates.
I got an Arsenal jersey on right now that has a giant fly Emirates across the chest. And listen, I can feel how I feel about them. But ultimately, the Emirates Airlines decided to pay my favorite team millions and millions of dollars that allows them to stay competitive. So,
well, the thing is that without universal disarmament, there's no way to stop it. Right. So like it even gets to that idea about like incentives and stuff, because at the end of the day, somebody else is going to offer those incentives. Unless there is a rule universally disarming incentives, we're never getting rid of them. They're never not going to happen. And it's the same thing with sports until we have universal rules, which is not going to happen because everybody wants to make money. Being the valiant one who like stands up, you're just going to get snow rolled, and eventually your team bought by somebody else who doesn't care.
And the point about that is, what reason would the league have to potentially kneecap a promotional advertising or revenue source for a team?
Yeah, I was listening to Bobani Jones, The Right Time. I really like that show, and he's got some real strong opinions on a lot of things, as he always has. You know Bomani, right? And he made this point of like, especially with gambling, all the other stuff, does any of it matter anymore? No. Because we've gone so far off the edge. Like,
if pizza is where you draw the line, then you need to get back to outlawing FanDuel and DraftKings. right? Like if we are going to talk about,
we're the only podcast that talks about sports at some point that does not get money from either one of them.
but that's what I'm saying. But if we are going to talk about the quote unquote sanctity of baseball and reserving its traditions and all that good stuff, then you got to get sports betting out the box, and you're never going to do that
Because people like it.
Yes, people love it. Okay. And not everybody who does it has these deep gambling addictions. Many do. But we have no leg to stand on when we're talking about decommercializing sports, when we allow en masse people to bet on sports. We've allowed corporations to come in and build in more commercial breaks for sports. We've allowed the billboards and the branding to be everywhere. What are we talking about?
Even on lower levels. So here's a stat that blew my mind. There is more than $8 million in take on a USL championship game. So Detroit City's league,
Right.
down there in the second division, there's still $8 million in action on average on a USL
Per
game,
USL game.
which is bananas,
Yeah,
right?
and this is in sports betting.
Yeah.
And
So I can only imagine what it is for. I didn't look up the stat
for like
before I started.
MLS.
Yeah, or Tigers or NFL.
Exactly. So it just feels to me, and this is no diss to the piece, everybody's entitled to their opinion. It just feels like a weird line in the sand to me of, home run celebrations. Like it just feels very pearl clutchy, but it's like, that's minor. That's not a big deal, right? Especially if there's convergence between the team ownership and the baseball team itself. It'd be different if we're talking about bringing in Ford Motor Company and you hit the home run and then you hop on top of a Ford branded Mustang mini car and yes, okay, that's silly. But you're talking about like a little Red Wings prop or a Little Caesars prop, like that makes sense, man.
I don't really have anything else to add.
Exactly, because it's silly. It's a silly line in the sand. And it's crazy because you contrast that, and I know I talk a lot about soccer, it's my favorite sport, but you contrast that with soccer and its growth especially among Gen Z, which they said this soccer is their preferred sport, and I believe it was a study done by ESPN.
Fun fact, among those 18 to 34, podcasts are more popular than TV.
Yes, but amongst that demographic, that's growing, and the sport is still struggling to find additional funding, and it's struggling to find additional ads and additional funding because they refuse to build in commercials into the sport. So if we're talking about the purity of the sport, baseball is the wrong one to watch. Football is the wrong one to watch. Basketball is the wrong one to watch. If you're talking about the purest sport left is soccer, because they refuse to change the rules to build in commercials into the game.
Even though the jerseys are full of logos.
And
so you don't think that's the line?
No, because it's unobtrusive. It doesn't change anything about the game. Meanwhile, you literally have to stop football.
Well, and there's different length of timeouts, like in the NCAA tournament.
Yes. TV timeouts
are different, and they're different than during the regular season, so you adjust accordingly and have to re-strategize.
The actual length of the game is different for commercial reasons. So if we are going to talk about something in terms of the over-commercialization of sport, pizzas at the end of a home run is not where we go. I'm sorry.
I would love to hear your thoughts. dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211. Norris Howard, I'm so glad to talk to you about this because this is something that I think Metro Detroiters can be very proud of.
Yeah, for sure. You got a couple of James Beard Award finalists. Those who are unfamiliar, that's one of the highest honors that can be awarded to restaurateurs across the world. And we got 2 finalists right here in Metro Detroit.
And we've had a lot of nominees and semifinalists, but not always do we get in the finalist area.
Yeah. So we got Mamba Hamisi from Boabab Fair. He and his wife are both up for this win. And I think this is great. I mean, Boabab has been a shining star, I think, in the restaurant scene in Metro Detroit since its opening. They were winners of the Motor City match. They had pop-ups for many years.
They've secured their spot on the east side for their second location.
Yep, for their second location. So they're expanding. I mean, it's a great place. All the food is fantastic. Everybody I took my mother-in-law there actually, I would say about 4 weeks ago, last month, and she loved it. was absolutely enamored with the place. And I just think, when we're looking at the model for what kind of the restaurant scene in the city can be, I think Boabab is a fantastic blueprint.
It elevates everything. And to be clear, they are up for outstanding restaurateur.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're into so many different things. And if you have not gone yet, it is one of the best experiences. I know some people get a little bit, it's African food. It's not, you're not ordering
You're not getting
burger
burgers
there.
and fries.
No,
Yeah,
but it's totally worth it. And it's
absolutely
a great experience. The next one is from Clawson, Norris Howard.
Yeah, that's right. We have Hajime Soto, who's the chef at Sozai in Clawson. Again, sushi and Japanese food spot, a place that you could be very, 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 very pleased if you go to. He's up for Best Chef Great Lakes, which includes Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio.
Huge. And you know what? I've been hearing good things about the Clawson scene lately. It's like been a thing.
Clawson kind of for the past I say 15 years or so, has always had kind of one or two restaurants that just kind of pop up or have been around that people just seem to always like. So word to Clawson and word to Hajime Soto out there. And, I'm just really happy to see this kind of recognition in Metro Detroit, because many people, when they ask me, oh man, what is there to do in Detroit? I always mention two things, bare minimum. I always say, go to the DIA and the African American History Museum and eat. Those are always the two things I tell you to do.
Another thing that's notable to me about this is that it is not quote unquote Detroit unquote fare, right? We're so obsessed with the Conies, the pizza, the whatever.
Yeah.
Both of these, not that.
Yeah, and it's the same reason why I tell folks, like, if you got the time and the money, go to Freya. Like, it's just the dining experience at Freya is just so fantastic that everybody should experience it. And I'm going to say one thing, and I know they're not nominated here, but one thing I will say about Freya that I appreciate, the same people from the first time I went still work there. And to me, that's always a measure of a good restaurant, which that means people are getting paid well, people are in a good work environment, people appreciate what's happening there, because I'm not seeing a lot of employee turnover at Freya, and I think that's a good sign. And the same thing at these other restaurants as well. So go to all three, but definitely try out Boabab if you haven't, and definitely try out Sozai if you haven't.
So people know, Norris Howard, you are not going to be here next week.
No, I'm not.
You're running away again.
Yeah, as usual, man.
Will there be baby seals again?
No baby seals, but there will be Rat Kings and pissy subway stairwells.
New York.
Yes, indeed. I am going.
Pleasure, business?
Combination of both.
Okay.
Yeah, combination of both.
And I could tell by the light in your eyes, you're actually looking forward to this trip, despite the jokes.
I like New York. I do. I like how dense it is. I like how it's always busy. I like how loud it is. I like that it kind of smells. Like, I like it. It's a nice change of pace. I'm not sure if I would live there, but once a year I try to get to New York City somehow, some way. And also the people in New York are just weird. The accents, they yell about everything. It's great, man. It's great.
Well, just so everyone knows, to be sure, I did not stuff Norris in a trunk.
No.
I did not throw him in the river. He is going to come back in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Well, with that, I am Jer Stays.
And I'm Norris Howard.
Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Don't forget to drop 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget that you are somebody. Take care of each other, and we'll talk tomorrow.